Hello everyone, my name is Jack Spiegler. I'm a master's student in biomedical engineering at Northwestern University. And today, I would like to discuss why we need to treat Alzheimer's with a global perspective. To begin, I'll give a little background on Alzheimer's. So Alzheimer's is actually a form of dementia, and dementia is a general term for diseases that affect memory and cognition. Alzheimer's is actually the most common form of dementia. It affects 60 to 80% of dementia patients. It's a neurodegenerative form of dementia, which means that your brain cells die over time. And like I said, 60 to 80% of dementia patients have Alzheimer's. Around 1 in 9 US adults over the age of 65 has Alzheimer's. And that actually sums up to most of the 6 million and over Americans that are living with Alzheimer's currently. In 2019, dementia cost world economies $1.3 trillion. Additionally, society is getting older. The 65 and older population is expected to grow to 1.5 billion people by 2050, and the 80 and older population is projected to triple by 2050. The reason this is important is because age is the most common risk factor for Alzheimer's and is much more common to be diagnosed with Alzheimer's after the age of 65. Additionally, there's only 2 FDA-approved drugs that actually aim to change the course of the disease itself. Currently, the other drugs on the market are for treating the symptoms of the disease like memory and cognition. But fortunately, there's hope, and this is all of the drugs currently in clinical trials right now in the United States alone for Alzheimer's, and there are 143 drugs in the drug development pipeline for Alzheimer's. And while I'd love to talk about all of these with you today, I'm going to talk about 3 that I believe are very relevant to today and the future. To begin, aducanumab, it's one of the 2 FDA-approved drugs on the market for treating the disease itself, and the other drug is very similar that's FDA-approved, so just kind of consider them in the same vein. Aducanumab is based off of the amyloid hypothesis. This means that a plaque called amyloid beta, it's just a protein, builds up in Alzheimer's patients' brains, and when it builds up, your brain becomes inflamed, and with this inflammation, you have cognitive decline and development of Alzheimer's proceeds. Amyloid beta targeting drugs, such as aducanumab, remove this brain plaque buildup, and doing so with the hope that the cognitive decline is restored. However, there's been over 20 late-stage clinical trial drugs that, although they've been able to remove this plaque from patients' brains, it doesn't actually show significant cognitive decline. And as a result, this needs to be an area that's further studied. There's also a side effect with this type of drug that causes temporary brain swelling, which can sometimes be severe as well. So this needs to be an area that needs to be significantly more further studied, and I'm not super optimistic that this is the only approach we need. It's also intravenous infusions monthly, which could be very difficult for certain groups of people. Now, I know I expressed a little pessimism on the first drug, but these 2 next ones are 2 in clinical trials that I believe to be very promising. The first one is GV971. It actually targets the gut microbiome. So the trillions of bacteria that live in our gut have been associated with a lot of different processes, not just in our gut, but all over our body. And what GV971 aims to do is restore the bacteria in our gut when a patient has Alzheimer's. You see, in Alzheimer's patients, bacteria levels change. And when the bacteria levels change in our gut, this actually results in different levels of protein building blocks being expressed. When these different levels of proteins are expressed, it triggers a cascade of reactions in our brain that becomes the brain to become inflamed and cognitive decline to proceed. With this, GV971 aims to recondition the microbiome so that the bacteria levels remain normal, and as a result, the protein levels are expressed in a normal way, and there's less inflammation and less cognitive decline. It's currently in clinical trials, and hopefully it becomes something that, with more studies, is a safe and effective way to treat the disease. It is an oral drug and is actually a large sugar molecule. Next is NE3107. It aims actually at insulin. I think when I first read about this drug, I thought of insulin as just the energy source for the body and telling the body how to use its energy. But interestingly, insulin also regulates the energy of the brain. And what insulin does is when it regulates the energy of the brain in Alzheimer's, the brain's response to insulin declines. And when the brain's response to insulin declines, brain cells are no longer able to use their energy correctly, and as a result, they die. And kind of what I was talking about before, how Alzheimer's is a neurodegenerative disease, this really hits the nail on the head of how one of the ways that Alzheimer's could be a neurodegenerative disease. NE3107 aims to increase the brain's response to insulin so that the brain cells know how to use their energy correctly and can stay alive. This is also an oral drug, and it is a large steroid hormone-derived molecule. If we look at this chart, I'm going to soon refer to anything not high-income, low- and middle-income countries. Geographically, it's very evident that although there are some high-income countries, most countries that you see are in the low- and middle-income space. And interestingly, over 60% of dementia patients live in these low- and middle-income countries. By 2050, 2/3 of the world's population age 60 and older will actually live in these low- and middle-income countries. A lot of dementia patients live in these low- and middle-income countries now, and they're going to get older at a faster rate in the future in these countries. So it makes them at significant danger for Alzheimer's to progress there. You need MRI scanners to help with making sure that the side effects of your Alzheimer's treatment are going well. You need to be able to scan the brains of patients just to monitor their treatment, monitor their brains, and to study Alzheimer's and make sure that it's being adequately treated in the future. High-income countries, it's pretty easy to find an MRI scanner. There's 27.3 MRI scanners per million people. It's significantly lower, 1.1 and 0.2 in low and middle-income countries, meaning that it's significantly more difficult to find an MRI scan in these countries and puts them at significant risk of not having the adequate resources they need to help treat this disease. You also need people to read the MRI scans. You need people to administer drugs. You need people to diagnose Alzheimer's. You need physicians for that. There's 3.1 physicians per 1,000 people in high-income countries, but this number lowers significantly for low- and middle-income countries. Low- and middle-income countries have significantly less resources for a disease that might be something that becomes very relevant to them in the future. In addition, how about refrigerating the drugs, or if it's a monthly infusion, being able to get to a care center every month could be difficult for people in any country, but more specifically low- and middle-income countries. Takeaway is that low- and middle-income countries need to be significantly more considered as we design and develop more drugs, yes, for Alzheimer's, but also more drugs, more diseases in the future. And I'll be pursuing a thesis for my master's from this spring to next spring in the Falk Center for Molecular Therapeutics to investigate Alzheimer's therapies. Thank you.